Hey guys, we are back. This is the MMA Takeover on the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network and the newly reborn SureDog Radio Network. I am your host, Keith Shillan. I am a writer for Cageside Press, SureDog, and am the executive producer of the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. Guys, it's a little bit of a down week in MMA, as it is, of course, Independence Day, 4th of July weekend. There's not a UFC. There is an Invicta. Actually, starting in about 45 minutes. So I'm going to try to get through this so I can check out that card. But I got to cover the stories. We have a special guest, Julian Erosa, Juicy J, who pulled off a huge, massive upset over Sean Woodson this past weekend at UFC Vegas. But like I said, we have a little bit of a gap before we get to Fight Island on Yaz Island, headlined by 3 title fights. We're really gonna focus on that next week. I'm gonna have an announcement about that in the final segment. But let's start with it. I'm gonna get right to the first segment. These are my top 5 news stories, or the top 5 topics that really stood out to me this week. Like I said, it's a little bit of a down week, so let's get to it. So one thing during this coronavirus, everything's been put on hold. A lot of people's summer plans have been put on hold. But one thing, luckily, we are not missing is the Dana White Contender Series. There's been some fight announcements. There's going to be several weeks of this. It's going to go into the fall, and I'm really excited about this. Now, I really look forward to the summer cookouts, graduation parties, going to the beach, going to amusement parks, whatever your thing is. I love, going to baseball games, whatever. But I also love the Contender Series. And during the summer, it's actually one of my busiest time because I do the Contender Series previews for SureDog. I spend tons of hours digging into the fighters, and I would have been really disappointed if the Contender Series, due to coronavirus, was taken away. I think it's a great way to find talent. The UFC, I think there needs to be some improvements on how they find some of the talent, who they give contracts to. But generally speaking, I think the Contender Series has been a success. It's not for everybody; it's more for the hardcores. But I think you spend 2.5 hours checking out these fighters on a Tuesday night. Summers are busy, but it's usually not crazy busy where you're, on a Tuesday where every night is, stacked, where you can't find time to check out the stuff. I love it. I think they've had success. They've had 3 seasons. I was just looking over the UFC rankings. There's probably about 10 fighters from the Contender Series that are already currently in the UFC rankings. I think some of the biggest stars of the sport could be coming, from the Contender Series. I mean, Sean O'Malley could turn into one of the biggest stars in the sport, of the face of sports. Guys like Edmund Shabazian has a lot of potential. Jeff Neal is a guy that a lot of people think could fight for a title. These are all guys that came off the Contender Series, so it's really nice that series did not miss a season. So yeah, I just really pumped about it. Let's get to my number 4 story of the week. This is something that stuck out to me is. So Paige Van Zandt is fighting at UFC 251. She's fighting at Amanda Hebus, and Paige Van Zandt was a girl that the UFC invested a lot in. She was on the Dancing with the Stars. She's obviously a very attractive young lady. When she first came to UFC, she started off 3-0, and then she's really faltered. She's at 26 years old right now. She's kind of a do-or-die moment in her career. You have to wonder how focused she is when she's really talked about she makes more money off Instagram, she makes more money off the Dancing with the Stars and fighting the UFC. That obviously is not going to go over well. Even if it is the truth, it's not going to go over well with the brass to be announcing these things. And this is her last fight in her UFC contract. She's been very open about that. She's getting put against a very tough girl, a girl that a lot of people are very high on, Amanda Hebus. Amanda Hebus is actually currently right now is a negative 900 favorite, and Paige Van Zandt would be a plus 600 underdog. That would be one of the biggest upsets of the year if Paige Van Zandt beats Amanda Hebus. And I think the UFC understands that. They want her to lose. I think they expect her to leave the UFC. They don't, you don't ever want to see someone you invest in someone that's a star, leave on a high note. They could be probably the biggest win in Paige VanZant's career if she can pull off this upset. But times have not been good for her. As I already mentioned, she started off her career 2-3. Then she took a big step up in competition, and she started off 3-0 in the UFC, and then she took a big step up in competition. She's gone 2-3 since then. Her wins have not been, the best top girls in the UFC. I mean, she beat Beck Rawlings. She beat Rachel Ostovich. During that run, she got absolutely decimated by Rose Namajunas back in 2015, where she actually closed as a slight favorite. Think about this. Rose Namajunas, a girl that recently held the title. Paige VanZant was a negative 140. Just a slight favorite over her. She got dominated that one. She was pretty much pick 'em against Michelle Waterson, got dominated that one. Her worst loss, the one where she broke her arm against Jessica Rose Clark. Paige VanZant has not turned out what the UFC was hoping. They were kind of hoping that she would be the face of women's MMA with the departure of Ronda Rousey. Between injuries and just not that skilled, not that high level. I mean, she has skill, but she's not that high level champion contender. I think this is the last we see of Paige VanZant in the UFC. I think there's not many people who are expecting her to re-sign with the UFC. Her husband, Austin Vanderford, is a fighter for Bellator. She just seems to fit at Bellator. She's corners Austin when he fights. I was actually at Mohegan Sun with one of his fights. She was there, and she seemed happy there. She was talking with Scott Coker and talking to the people over at Bellator, and seemed very happy there. And it just seems like a better fit for her. The 125-pound division in Bellator is a division she'd have to fight in. It is nowhere near as stacked as the UFC's division. And also, Bellator has no problem feeding stars easy wins. They'd have no problem sticking on our main card, get her a girl that's nowhere near her skill set to get her some wins. To me, it totally makes sense for her to go over to Bellator. And I would be really surprised if she, I really think there's two options. She could just stop fighting altogether. But if she does continue fighting, I would be really surprised if she went anywhere but to Bellator. Speaking of changes, one thing, and speaking of UFC 251, one thing that has been getting the headlines is Kamaru Usman, the welterweight champion of the world, has actually changed camps. Now, the build-up to this fight is he's fighting his teammate, Gilbert Burns. They both trained at Hard Knocks 365. Also, I know it's called Stanford MMA now or whatever. It was announced that Kamaru Usman is going out to Colorado. He's training with Trevor Whitman, training with Justin Gaethje, training with these guys. I don't know if it's. I know he went out there. He's been doing some training with Justin Gaethje. Was working with Justin Gaethje for his Tony Ferguson fight. I like that he already went out there and tested the waters. He didn't just say, "I'm going to go out. Here's some good news to go out and start training with Trevor." He's already been there, so that's a good thing. That makes me feel a little bit better. But also, Trevor Whitman has had such great success with so many fighters, and he really is more that boxing instructor, which is, if we were picking apart Usman's game, we'd probably still put that as his weakest part of his game is his striking, though I don't really think it's that much of a weakness anymore, but it's still definitely his weakness. He said one of the reasons he changed, obviously, the weirdness of training there with Gilbert. He also mentioned that there's other welterweights in that team that, that are gunning for him, and then it was time for him to move on. I think it's good. It's going to help him get a little bit more one-on-one. Trevor Whitman does not have this huge stable that Stanford MMA does. I also think it really benefits Justin Gaethje by having Kamaru Usman train with him, because Justin Gaethje is set to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov. What better way to train for probably the best wrestler in MMA, at least in the MMA realm? He's not the most credentialed wrestler, but he probably the most effective wrestler in MMA, and that's Khabib Nurmagomedov. Well, what better way to train for Khabib than training with a bigger, more powerful, similar version, a guy who likes to close distance, likes to pin against against, likes to take it down, likes to get on top. I mean, I think that really is going to do wonders for Justin Gaethje by having Usman in there as a training partner. The person that might not benefit that much is Rose Namajunas. I mean, Rose Namajunas trains with Trevor Whitman. She's fighting on the same card as Kamaru Usman. Will she still get the amount of attention that she was getting before Kamaru Usman? That I don't know. Trevor Whitman is, to me, I hold him in high regard. I think he's definitely one of the best coaches. While I hope it doesn't affect Rose Namajunas, and I don't expect it to, it's definitely something I'm keeping an eye on. Now, moving on to my number 2 topic of the week. This comes off the heels of what we saw last Saturday, the absolute war classic battle between Dustin Poirier and Dan Hooker. The thing I'm going to bring up is, and I brought this up on the recap, people are saying that this is the fight of the year. I highly disagree with this one. I think it was one of the best fights I've ever seen. But to me, the fight of the year is Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Weili Zhang, and it's by a landslide. Like, to me, that one should already be put on all the trophies. It should already be sent to the fighters. To me, I said it, and I rewatched the fight like 3 or 4 times now. It might be the greatest fight I've ever seen. It is that good. This fight, I'm not trying to disrespect these two fighters by saying that it wasn't the fight of the isn't the fight of the year. I'm not trying to disrespect them. I just don't think it was the fight of the year. I think it's an incredible fight. But there was times in that fight where they slowed down. There was times where it got a little sloppy. That Dan Hooker got tired. When we break down the rounds, the second round, I heard people saying it's the round of the year, and it very well may be. But the difference between this fight and Joanna versus Weili is Joanna Weili, all 5 rounds might be fight of the year. I mean, it should be round of the year. All 5 rounds were incredible. As I said, Dan Hooker really kind of hit a wall, especially in the 4th and 5th round, the championship rounds. You can't say that about Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Weili Zhang. They both were throwing great technique. Their output was insane. I mean, the strikes thrown by these girls was 408 and 360. You compare that to Poirier and Hooker, it was 230 and 221. I mean, it's a big gap. Also the damage. Now, while obviously Dustin Poirier showed his foot, his ankle's huge, and they both are obviously busted up. Joanna Jędrzejczyk had this thing growing out of her head. I mean, when they showed the pictures of Joanna after the fight, I didn't recognize her. If I didn't watch that fight and someone just showed me the picture and said, "Who is this fighter?" I don't know if I would have found the in my brain to say Joanna Jędrzejczyk, because she looked nothing like her. That was how much damage she took. And the biggest thing also is how competitive it was. The Poirier and Hooker fight obviously was extremely competitive, but I don't know anybody who argued that Dan Hooker won. I think pretty much everybody had it 3 rounds to 2 for Dustin Poirier. A couple people even had it 4-1 for Dustin Poirier. Now, I went with the MMA decisions. It's 19-0. Not a single person who submits the scorecard to MMA decisions scored it for Dan Hooker. Now, compare that to Weili Zhang versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk. It's 15-6 in favor of Weili. Now, obviously, it's still a pretty good gap, but 6 outlets, 6 writers, 6 whoever was submitted, including myself, scored it for Joanna Jędrzejczyk. I think if you watched both fights back to back, you would select Weili Zhang versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk as the fight of the year. And now to my number 1 topic. I don't know if this is a topic necessary for this week, but it's just a topic that it's been really going on for a long time now. Certain sports don't need stars. The NFL really doesn't need stars. The NFL can survive without stars. The NFL, the brand, the sport, the football is a star, and the fan base are loyal to their teams. Patriots fans will support the Patriots even with Tom Brady leaving. Packers fans support the Packers. Raiders fans and Chargers fans, Steelers fans, or whatever fan base, Cowboys fans, whatever fan base you are, that fan, you could be a fan for centuries. I shouldn't say centuries, but that's centuries. All right. Decades. Maybe your family could be, your great grandfather rooted for the Cowboys, and that's why you root for the Cowboys because your grandfather did, and then your father did, and then you did, or that's what the area. So there's loyalty, and it survives. While other sports, I think is completely star driven. For most part, most people don't care about golf unless Tiger Woods is going for the Masters. It's his last shot. When somebody else wins, if it's not a star, it doesn't seem to get the same recognition. Tennis, swimming. These guys are all like, when Michael Phelps was going for records, people were watching the Olympics a lot more than some other Olympian winning a record. Or, the French Open, the U.S. Open, when Serena Williams is winning a championship, people are way more interested than another tennis that you might not know. The UFC, now I don't want to say MMA, I'm specifically talking just the brand of the UFC. The UFC, to me, is like a balance between the two. The brand sustains, and this is what I think other organizations struggle, because so many casual fans, when they think of MMA, they think of the UFC. My kids call MMA UFC. They don't call it MMA. They say, "Oh, Daddy's watching UFC." I could be watching the Invicta card tonight. I could be watching PFL. I could be watching old film studies, Pride, or no matter what it is. He's watching the UFC. And there's a lot of people who think that way. And because of that, these other organizations will always seem second class. And until they can prove they're on the same level, while, I think AJ McKee is one of the brightest young stars in the sport. I think he's as talented as they come. I think, this guy could do very well in the UFC. That's because I'm a hardcore and I understand the difference. But to a lot of people, when they ask me, "Oh, what's this Bellator?" they're talking about what they perceive as a minor leagues, like almost a feeder system to the UFC. And I try to explain to them, like, no, it's like 1A and 1B. Yeah, like not everyone in Bellator is as good as UFC, but vice versa. There's a lot of guys in the UFC that would struggle in Bellator, but a lot of guys, they don't understand this. But also why I say it's a balance between two. While the casual fans might think of MMA and they only think UFC, they only tune in when stars are there. And when a star shows up, that's when your Dave & Buster's, your Buffalo Wild Wings, all these places that show the fights, those bars are packed. That's when the pay-per-views go 800,000, 900,000, some in the millions, is when these stars. You still need a star. So that's what I'm saying. Like, the UFC is a balance between the NFL, where you have the brand. When I say football, most people think NFL. They're not thinking, obviously college football, but I'm talking about professional. Most people are not, when I say football, they don't think of Canadian Football League. Maybe in Canada, but here in America, they don't think Canadian Football League. You don't think Arena Football League. You don't think whatever the other leagues. You think NFL. So the UFC has that going for when people think MMA, they think of them. But they still need those Serena Williams, those Michael Phelps. They need those stars to draw to get people to watch. And I think the UFC's in it. It's always throughout the years. You're going back, where the Gracies first came in and they were going to be the stars, and that torch got pushed over to, Shamrocks and slowly, eventually, Randy Couture and Chuck Liddell, and then the tough era. Tito Ortiz was in there, and then eventually that passed on and on and on. But anyway, so where we are right now, I don't want to go through the whole series. Where we are right now. The reason why I say the UFC is in a really tough line, because a lot of these star fighters, they want to be paid like star fighters, and there's contract disputes, or they're also aging. This is why Usman is fighting Burns right now. Well, why is Usman fighting Burns? Usman's fighting Burns because the UFC couldn't get Jorge Masvidal to the table, or they got him to the table, but they couldn't get the deal in place that they wanted, and because obviously Masvidal wanted more money, so they had to go to Plan B, which is Burns. And this is an issue they're having not just with Jorge Masvidal, they're having a lot of fighters. Henry Cejudo, there's a 2 weight class champion. He announced his retirement, and I do believe that some of his retirement had to do with, years and years of training for the Olympics, and obviously he accomplished so much. But it also has to do with, I think it's the risk versus reward. Does he want to put his body through this without the reward of the bigger money? Does he want to put his life to the side? He talks about having a girlfriend now and trying to live a normal life that he never really had a chance. Does he want to do that and not live like a superstar athlete does? Not have the cars, not have the houses that, the biggest basketball players and I shouldn't say the biggest, just any basketball player has. And it's not him. Obviously, you got a guy like George St. Pierre. He retired early, so he's on the sidelines. Brock Lesnar and Ronda Rousey are two of the biggest stars they've ever had. They're doing, they're retired or they're doing wrestling. John Jones, who I think is the greatest fighter of all time, he says that he's sitting out. He's having very open dialogue about the UFC, complaining about pay, talking about he was willing to sit out. That's not good for them. The Diaz brothers are also stars. They're always tough to get to the table. Nick Diaz hasn't fought in forever. Stipe Miocic, the heavyweight champion of the world, he's been open about his dispute with the UFC. He's rather fighting fires right now. I know he's supposed to fight in August and it's signed and everything, but he's a guy that's been publicly not happy. Daniel Cormier, a guy who's a star, but he's saying this is his last fight, win or lose. Obviously Conor, there was a time when Conor was fighting every 2 months. Now he's fighting every 2 years. Anderson Silva's well in his I think he's like 43 or 44 years old. Dana White has actually talked about, not knowing what to do with him, not to mention that, he's not the draw that he once was. So the UFC has this star problem right now. Now, when I really think about established stars in the UFC, who can the UFC, have right now that not only are they star potential, but also they can work with them right now? It seems like Khabib is one of them. I think Adesanya is right on that cusp of stardom, but they're having a little trouble booking Adesanya and Carson fight. I know there was talks about Ultimate Fighter show. I know that rumor got out there, but I'm saying they're having trouble booking that fight. So they have a star problem, and which really led me to think is who are the future stars? Who has that potential? Because when I think of a star, to me, it's a two-part thing. You have to have the skills. Going back to what we talked about Paige VanZant. Paige VanZant has the personality. She has some looks. She's blonde hair. She's beautiful. She's got this girl next door, charm to her. This kind of giddy. She knows how to market herself on social media. But she just didn't have the elite skills. I think a guy like Mike Perry. Mike Perry's a wild guy. And I think a lot of people like that brash, tough guy. But he doesn't have the elite skills. Then you have the other end. You have guys who have these skills oozing out of them, but they don't have the personality. Think about Demetrius Johnson. Demetrius Johnson had the longest reign as a champion in the UFC, and he couldn't get over the fans. He did some dazzling things. Think about the move he did to Ray Borg. It is when he picked up Ray Borg and when he was bringing him down, changed the armbar. Dude, that is one of the most amazing moments from the physical talent that I've ever seen in this sport. But he still couldn't get over fans because he didn't have the personality. So you got to find a guy who has the balance between personality and skill. Now, the first guy that thinks in mind that I think could be a future star, I said in the first segment, number 5 star, I should say, is Sean O'Malley. This guy he's flashy. Look at his knockout of Eddie Wineland. It was spectacular. He's got the personality. He's out on Twitter talking junk to Peter Yan. He was smoking weed with Snoop Dogg. To me, this guy is head and shoulders. That's the guy that the UFC should be putting their stock into, that he could be that next star. Another guy, I know he's not a young buck, and not a guy that you think of like future, because the future's now, but Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou, besides the whole, African thing, it's an area that has been really booming in MMA in Africa. I think that obviously is good to have a guy from that area backing a whole continent to back him, but also he's starching guys with serious, scary fashion. Mike Tyson, this is what Mike Tyson. Now, Francis Ngannou does not have the Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson had this scary, tough guy from the hood, from the streets of New York, just insane power. But Francis Ngannou also does have insane power. He did, I don't think he could ever reach that Mike Tyson status. But he keeps knocking people dead with one punch, or one strike in seconds. This is a guy that could really become a bigger star. A couple other names that were thrown out to me, and I want to shout out to my guys over at MMA Takeover. I threw this question out to them and see what some of the names they came up with that they could see star. Edwin Shabazian, a guy that we also talked about, Contender Series. Darren Till. Darren Till has the personality. He's kind of, they really put their put a push into him. And, a couple years ago when Tyron Woodley beat him, they kind of went down. But, I mean, you see what he's doing on Instagram and different social media. But he's doing to Mike Perry, the way he's trolling Mike Perry is classic. Aljamain Sterling is a guy that he keeps getting better each and every fight, and he's got a big personality. He's fun, great in interviews. But the one that fought this past weekend that could become a star, I don't know if she has the skill, but she's young. When she got the armbar was spectacular. Is Kay Hansen. I mean, she's so young. They were really trying to do this Ronda Rousey connection that she came up, wanted to fight when she saw Ronda Rousey, and then Ronda Rousey tweeted her. Maybe she's somebody. I think it's a little too early to put that high expectations on a girl who's only 20 years old. But anyways, those are the people that I'm really looking at to keep an eye on in the UFC that could be future stars. All right, guys, we are at that portion of the podcast where I talk to a fighter. This fighter had a hell of a week. Besides having one of my favorite nicknames in all of MMA, this guy took a fight on 5 days' notice. Not only did he fight one of the toughest guys in the UFC, he beat him and got a $50K bonus. He, of course, is Juicy J himself, Julian Erosa. Julian, first of all, man, congratulations. Life must be so good right now.
Yeah, man, it's absolutely amazing. Monday, didn't have a fight. And then Saturday, I had one of the best fights I could have had, and the best outcome I could have asked for. Not only did I beat a guy who was, the odds had me stacked against, or he was stacked against me, and then he's a tall, rangy guy. He had a lot of guys looking out for him already, and for me to get that win, and not only get that win, but be able to submit him, and then get a $50K bonus, that was about the best outcome you could ask for.
Yeah. Someone's prayers might have been answered. I know that it seems absolutely crazy to be out of the UFC to getting 50K bonus a week later. I mean, that's absolutely fantastic. Congratulations once again. So I want to talk about something before we talk about fight. I want to talk about something you said in the post fight press conference. You said this is your third stint in the UFC, that you start doubting yourself. You started questioning what were you doing wrong. So let me ask the question now that you have this great moment, but what were you doing wrong?
I was talking to another guy on another interview, and I kind of broke it down, and I didn't really think about it until I kind of started breaking it down. But when I first was in the Ultimate Fighter and came off that show and got my first stint in the UFC, I was really young, and I really didn't know what I was doing and what was going on, kind of, and so
sure.
I think I was kind of immature in the sport, and I got cut after one loss, so that was kind of weird as well. But I ended up getting out of the UFC, getting back in, and I got to a point in my head where I was kind of desperate for fights. I would fight anybody, anytime, anywhere. I was just like one of those guys that just wanted to do that, and I think I was fighting too desperate. I fought Devontae Smith on 10 days notice, and he's up a weight class. And then I fought Grant Dawson, and I actually had an ear infection a week before that. I was on antibiotics, and I just had to pull out of that fight because I didn't want to be. I was worried about getting cut. I lost. Just got knocked out, and I figured if I pulled out, who knows? The UFC, kind of does what they want. And so I want to be one of those guys they can count on, and I took that fight when I shouldn't have. And then I fought Julio Arce, and there's nothing really wrong with that fight. I think I was winning that fight up until I got knocked out, and so that kind of was just a bad circumstance. But I think I was fighting. I wasn't fighting as a desperate fighter. I was just taking fights desperately. And this time around, beggars can't be choosers, so I had to take what they gave me. But I was in shape, ready to rock. And but I think this time around, I'm going to be a little smarter with kind of my approach to taking fights, and having a performance like that gives me a little bit of leeway. I don't have to just take whatever they give me, whatever scraps they give me. I can maybe be a little bit smarter about who I pick, and if I ran into a situation where I do get a little injured, I can pull out without worrying about being cut.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. You got the call. I'm assuming your manager was the one who called you up, or whoever did, and it was Monday night, correct, when you got the call? So just tell us exactly, how did this all come along?
Well, it was actually Tuesday, Monday, Sunday, Monday, and actually the previous weeks, up in the UFC, Apex was every weekend. Fights were happening every weekend, and every weekend there would always be short notice fights. And my manager is one of the best managers, Jason House in Iridium Sports Agency. And he kept telling me, he's like, yo, Juice, there's these short notice fights. You're on the list, man. You're on the list with like 2 other guys to pick this fight. And they pick somebody else. But man, you're still on that list, man. You're one of the guys that they're shuffling through to get in on short notice. So I was just, the last like 6 to 8 weeks, I've been getting ready. I've basically been getting ready for a fight without having a fight, just because I figured, if something falls out, I want to be as prepared as possible. And, Monday rolled around and he was like, hey man, this fight might happen for you. He's like, just, make sure you're ready, make sure your weight's on point. And then I went to go get my blood drawn just to get my blood test done. And, Tuesday I went and got it done. And, right after I got my blood test done, Jason called me back and he's all like, we got you the fight. And, they had looked at a couple other guys to get the fight, but that fell out too. And, luckily I'm a local kid, was able to get my weight, where it needed to be. And, all my medicals got done really quick. So, it's easy for the UFC to just pop me right in. And, sure enough, and that's shout out to my manager. And, he was the one who got me all my medicals done within a day. And, he worked hard, just as hard as I'm working. He was working as, at the management level. And, so his hard work and my hard work together, basically paid off and came together for this fight.
Yeah. So I want to pull back the curtain a little bit on something you said. You said that, other fights were offered to Sean Woodson and they just fell apart. That's not what happened. The guys actually turned the fight down because Sean Woodson is not a guy that a lot of people want to fight ever, never mind on 5 days notice. One thing I do with SureDog is I do the Contender Series previews, and I want to be 100% honest with you. I've been talking about Sean Woodson since I started doing the film study of his Contender Series. I was telling everybody, you got to watch this guy. This guy's incredible. He's going to be a top contender. This is what I've been saying. What did you know about Sean Woodson before the fight was offered to you?
I knew Sean Woodson was a tall, rangy guy, a Golden Glove boxer guy. And obviously he's one of the biggest 45s out there. And he's like 6'3", 79-inch reach. So I knew I was going to have to get in on that. But I actually knew Terrence McKinney, who he fought on Contender Series. Terrence fought one of my training partners, and that was a pretty impressive win. But I didn't realize how big Sean Woodson was. And Terrence McKinney's not the biggest featherweight. I think Terrence had made 35 a few times.
Sure.
And so, but I didn't realize how big he was until I really started looking up his statistics and kind of his the little details of him. And then he beat Bokniak, and that's really impressive for your first UFC fight, to fight a tough ass guy like Bokniak, because Bokniak went 3 rounds with Zabit, and that was a banger of a fight. And so you got to give respect to somebody who's who can hold their own against a guy like Zabit, and is a tough guy. And I didn't get to really watch much of that fight, but I heard about it, and people were telling me that Woodson looked absolutely amazing, and obviously he won by unanimous decision. So he obviously has been doing things right, and he's got a lot of steam behind him. But for me, I'm a veteran, man. I had more than 4 times as many fights. I've been around the block. I got 5 fights combined in the Ultimate Fighter and the Contender Series. So I've been in the ring where there's nobody there, just like it was this last Saturday. So not only did I have way more fights than the kid, I had way more fights inside that kind of almost exact situation where there's nobody there. It's just Dana White, just the matchmakers, and just a couple coaches and stuff like that. So I knew, I had talked to my coaches and stuff, and training partners. I said, man, I hope I can get a fight at this Apex where nobody's there. I'm so comfortable with that. And I knew that would give me a little bit of an edge. I also had to make the fight dirty. People who know who I am, see me in the gym training, know that I'm one of those guys that can just keep going. And I really take a lot of pride in my conditioning and my ability to just be able to take damage and push through that. And so I knew Woodson, being a long, lanky guy, was going to have a decent amount of pop on his punches, but I wasn't necessarily worried about the knockout power. I was worried more about the 3, the 4, the 5 punch combinations. And, it's always a 3rd, 4th, 5th punch that you don't see coming that knocks you out. And so, the jabs, some of the first punches are the ones I would have to get through. And, he was doing good, man. He was keeping at range with his jab, but, I just had to get dirty with him. And, but I honestly, before the fight, I really didn't know much about him except for the couple of the last wins that he had. And, just looked him up on SureDog like everybody else does, and seen that he was 6'3", and then I kind of had to start, prepping for that a little bit as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that experience that you had from the Ultimate Fighter and the Contender Series, similar. But something that I wanted to ask you about, you said that you wanted to make it dirty. I think you'd be honest, the first round I scored for him.
No, that's what I thought.
Yeah. You made an adjustment. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Right away was your way of winning was pressure. But something happened between the first and second round where the tide just completely gets changed. After the first 5 minutes, he was ahead, and then you just pulled away after that. What was said to you in between the rounds that make you kind of be able to change the tides?
It wasn't necessarily anything my coaches had said to me. It was more about me turning it on. Sometimes, in fights, even in sparring sessions, it takes me like the second, the third, the fourth round to really, especially in sparring rounds, to get like almost that killer mentality. Like at first it's like, oh, I'm playing around, having a good time, enjoying it. But, you can't be too relaxed the whole fight because, next thing you know, the fight's over and you could be losing by a decision. So the first round went by and it was just me kind of feeling it out and having a good time. But I really needed to get that killer mindset going. And I want to say probably within the first minute or two, I started getting that. And then you can start hearing me start kind of grunting at him and talking to him while I'm fighting. And once I started getting to that, that's when I started getting more of that killer instinct and was really just willing to see which one of us is willing to die, and not necessarily die, but just, that mentality, like, are you willing to die? Because I'm willing to die right now. And if you want to test that, let's run it. And, that's one of the things that I feel like, nobody has above me necessarily. I mean, there's guys out there, greats like, Dan Hooker, Poirier, but that's the elite of the elite have that in their, in their mind. But some of these guys that are just coming up don't necessarily have that yet, where they can just be like, where they got to bite down their mouthpiece and just, you're willing to stand, I'm willing to stand. Let's just see who can outlast each other, who's got the more heart or the most heart, and, who's willing to, dive through it, and just stand toe to toe and just take it. And I think in the second round, I would just pressure him against the cage, and I could start feeling him wilting a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And that just got my confidence going even more. And, I started talking to him, and I could kind of tell he was, starting to slow up. But I think that all eventually, came to a climax in the third round when I was able to submit him. I think he was not necessarily looking for a way out, but I knew he wasn't going to go out easy on the feet. I was going to have to put him out on the feet. On the ground, I knew if I grabbed his neck up, especially in the third round when he started getting really tired, I figured he would be willing to find a way out of that fight. And and I wanted to test that. He's only got 7 fights. When I was 7 fights, I was still scared to death to walk out and fight people, especially in the UFC, man. It's crazy. When you're walking out and you see Sean Shelby, you see these guys, and so I knew, maybe he hasn't been tested too much. He's fought Bosniak, he fought Terrence McKinney, but underneath that, there was just regional guys. He's had a couple tests, but I really wanted to test him, with the pressure. And, I think it was just more of that switch that I turned on from the first round to the second. But my coaches are great. They always give me good advice in between rounds, but that was more of like a personal thing that I had to do myself to get into that zone.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot to unwrap there because you said a lot of things that really peaked with me. One thing that you talk about, this nonstop pressure and breaking them. I know you're always in the gym, you're always training, you're getting ready, but you still only had 5 days notice. So that's really impressive. I mean, not only 5 days notice, 5 notice to prepare for this one fighter. I said in our recap that I thought it was besides the physical breaking down, was the mental breaking down, that, he hasn't experienced someone who's just going to keep walking through the fire, which you were willing to just keep walking through the fire. I noticed in the first round, he was backing towards the cage a lot, but able to circle away, while the second and third round, it seemed like you were trapping him more, where he got to that cage and he was slowing down, you were catching up, and then you were landing your traps a lot more. Now, I want to talk about this. You were the biggest underdog on the card. I don't know if you knew that. I don't know if you probably don't even care about that, but there's got to be a little chip on your shoulder now that I'm sure I'm not the first person to say this to you. There's got to be a little chip on your shoulder now that you. So that said, what do you want to say to the people who set the lines, who said, this guy's not going to win? What do you want to say to those guys?
I was looking at, I try not to see some of the stuff online, just because it can kind of get to you. You see some people posting, like, I heard people, there was a video of like the matchup, and people were talking about how I'm going to, I was just a sacrifice a sacrifice, to this guy. I was just a lamb out to get slaughtered, and I was just a stepping stone for this kid because they're building this kid up so much. But the problem that I have with it is, people only get to see what we do in the cage. These guys that are setting the line, these guys that are talking this shit, these guys don't sit in the gym with me, train day in and day out. And they don't do it with that kid either. So they really have no idea. The only thing they can go off of is the fights that we've been in. And a lot of the regional stuff I've been on, there's not much videotape on that kind of stuff. So they were looking at some of that stuff and be like, oh, well, he beat this guy, but who knows how good those guys are, even how that fight even happened, or, what the outcome, or how it all, transpired. But so really the only kind of footage that a lot of people have is like, UFC stuff, and especially my recent UFC stuff, and it doesn't look good. I lost 3 in a row. And I get it, but they have no idea. They don't know who I am. They have never even met me before. And these guys are setting these lines. And so everybody in the gym that knew who I am and how good I am, all those guys made a decent amount of money by betting on me. Put $100 up. It was like 4-1. So people making $400 on me. One kid put $20 on me to win in the 3rd round specifically, and ended up walking away with it was plus 2,200. So he made
Nice.
440 on top of it or whatever for $20
Nice.
bet.
I hope they gave you some money. If these are your friends, I hope they toss you a little bit.
I've been getting taken out for dinner and beers. Almost like $200 tabs. I got guys paying for it, and it's and they're like, oh, don't even worry about it. We made $900 off you. And I'm like, all right, that's cool, man. I appreciate it. But
so is your next fight going to be at middleweight? Is that what's going to happen?
Oh, shoot, I get to celebrate a little bit, but I'm always, I went to the gym today, I was, and I went and trained this morning, and then, and I got 30, 45 days suspension because I got this cut above my eye. So I went and drilled this morning and, was able to do, to do that. And then I went to spar with everybody. I didn't spar myself, but I just was there for my teammates and helping them out as well. But, I'm just one of those guys that's always active and just always busy trying to train. Because for me, I just get bored. I truly love to train. I truly love to be in the gym. So even between fights, I'm getting ready for fights. So I always want to just be ready, especially being a guy like myself where I've been cut from the UFC a couple of times. It was always, especially the last the last handful of months. It's like I just knew if I just stayed in the gym and just kept my head down and just kept grinding, that something would pop up, whether it was with the UFC or something else. And sure enough, it did. I've been really blessed to have a manager that puts just as much work in it as I do. And one thing turned into another, and I was just super blessed to get this opportunity. And not only that, just be able to perform like I know I can. If you go to the gym and watch me train and spar, you'll see what just happened on Saturday. I do that every day, or I do this multiple times a week. And the one thing that's always upset me and, kind of gave me a chip on my shoulder is that I haven't been able to do that in the UFC, where I've been able to showcase how I am in the gym. That's exactly how I am. I choke out UFC guys. I put it on some of these other UFC guys, some of the top guys in the world, and, PFL, Bellator, these other guys that come in and, if you would talk to some of the guys that are around me, they would tell you all this, that I put in all the work. And, it's only because I love to do it. I mean, if you don't love to fight, it's the toughest way to make a living. I tell you what, man, this is the biggest payday I've had. And, if you average it out, I'm barely making it. If you average out the 12 years I've had with all the money I've made in the UFC, it doesn't come close to even a part-time job, So you really have to, love it. And, obviously I hope this is the first stepping stone into a long career in the UFC again. And, I just need to be a little bit smarter about it. I'm a little older, a little wiser, and I hope that this can be just the beginning of a good journey for through the UFC again.
Yeah, there's a lot of things I liked again that you said. You talked about contrasting, being such a tough job. Yeah, if you're a banker, a bad day at the bank is a customer gets mad at you. A bad day for a fighter, you're going out on a stretcher. So yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying. How it's such a tough job. You had talked about like a lot of people don't see you in the gym, don't know what you're capable of. Well, there was 2 guys around cage side, 2 legends, Dominic Cruz and Michael Bisping, who was going absolute crazy with your performance. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to what they said, but they were praising you. Obviously, the brass was very impressed with you because they threw you $50K. I'm sure you haven't got it yet, but they announced that you were the winner. So a lot of people were impressed. Now, one thing you also said in the the post-fight press conference, you mentioned that confidence, that you need confidence. Well, There's a reason why Sean Woodson is such a big favorite, because the dude is really good. There's a reason why I've been talking about the Contender Series, because he's really good, and I still believe that way, regardless of the outcome of this fight. But what does that say about you and you got to be so confident right now that you've gone out and now you showed that you could beat someone this high? Like, what does that do for, besides now all the bettors and Bisbing and Cruz and everyone being high, what does that do for yourself that you know that you can now beat the upper echelon of the UFC?
You know, it just reassures me that, you know, this is where I need to be. And it doesn't, you know, I haven't not thought I deserve to be in the UFC. You know, I thought I've deserved this for a long time. It just, you know, finally gives me that reassurance that, you know, I'm here. And not only that, just to reassure everybody that watches the UFC, you know, like, you know, when I first made it to the UFC and then my second stint, like, people just, you know, thought I was a joke. And it just sucks because I put so much time, so much effort. And even with the bad UFC run on my second time, I'm 24-8 right now. Like, that's a huge record. There's guys in the UFC that don't even have that type of record. And you know,
you should be 20. Sorry to interrupt you. You should be 25-7 because you beat that Patty Pimlet.
Oh, you know what? You know, yeah, that's one of those ones that just, you know, it was that, and that was me being young. You know, I got cut from the UFC, and I took that was the third fight I took after being cut from the UFC the first time. I took a short notice fight against a tough kid in the Northwest. Took another fight against another kid in the Northwest and finished both those guys. And then I heard Patty needed a fight, and I was like, 1 month? Hell yeah, let's do this. That's Conor McGregor's old belt.
Sure.
If I win that, they gotta put me back in. And you know, I went over there, and I didn't know this until after the fight that his manager is also the promoter of Cage Warriors, and it's a big no-no in the States, but over there,
regional move.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, I had to put him away, and if I didn't put him away, that he was gonna win no matter what. And the card was stacked against me before I even got there. One of the worst weight cuts I ever had because I had to travel over there. I really wasn't good at cutting weight even back then, and it was a super bad weight cut. I even looked kind of sucked up in the fight, but you know, I ain't gonna take nothing away from Patty. He's a tough competitor, and obviously we know where he's at now, where he ain't where I'm at. So,
and a lot of people thought you won that fight, myself included.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of people from Europe too. A lot of guys on his side of the pond, you know, sent me a lot of stuff. You know, a lot of positive words and encouragement. And you know, I felt like that. You know, I should have. There's times I could have finished him. You know, in the fourth and fifth round, I was walking him down. You know, I could have put the pressure on him a little bit more, but like I said, it was a bad weight cut for me, and I was just kind of running out of my own steam. But you know, the guy threw up like blood afterwards. That went viral and stuff like that. Yeah. Dude couldn't even walk afterwards. But you know, you win some and you lose some. Luckily, you know, I've been able to be, you know, still have the opportunity to get back in the UFC after, you know, kind of having the not so good run. But my dog's trying to kiss me. Yeah. But you know, I'm just super blessed about this whole situation.
Sure, I'm gonna get you out of here soon because people can't see because this is just an audio one. He's being very generous. He's at the dog park. His poor dog is probably about to pee himself if he doesn't let him out. Let me ask this question. So we just talked about it. I had it 1-1 heading into the third round. Anybody's fight. I felt like you had all the momentum. Third round starts off. You're backing him up. Everything's going your way. And I'm saying, well, he's going to be the same thing in a second. Then suddenly he caught you and dropped you. But when everyone was like, oh, man, like he was doing so well, now he's going to lose, it was like the complete opposite. You just popped right back up, didn't change anything, and then actually became more aggressive. And then shortly after, you got the takedown and the submission. So that was the thing that really impressed Cruz and Bisbing. They were saying, oh, my God, like there's nothing that can stop this guy. So let me ask a question. When you know it's a close fight and you get dropped, what is going through your mind that second? I know it was only a brief second that you briefly felt. What are you thinking in that moment?
So I was thinking almost exactly what you were thinking. The in between the second and the third round, I was thinking it's 1-1. But I already felt the dynamic of the fight was changing, and I was getting the momentum. So I just figured if I do the same thing I did in the second round, I'll win this fight regardless if it goes to decision or if I finish him or whatever. But I'm always looking for the finish, you know. And so thinking that, you know, once the third round started, I'm pressuring him, and I kind of walked into a left hook and you know, put me on my butt. And actually, that wasn't even the hardest punch I took in the fight. There was a couple other ones that, you know, rocked me more. That one didn't even really rock me, but obviously it looks bad when I get put in my butt. And so when he put me on my butt, I was thinking in my head, I got to do something big immediately, and then now I got to really do something big to like try to like just to let the judges forget that he dropped me. There's still a lot of still a few minutes in the third round, and I figure sometimes you watch a fight and someone get dropped in the beginning of a round, and then they do a bunch of good stuff later on, and you forget about it almost. So after he dropped me, I was like, okay. And then he got on top of me, and I was trying to, egg him on to grapple me, but he didn't want nothing to do with that. So he turned around. I started grabbing his legs, trying to, maybe get my legs tangled up. I'm not a leg lock guy, but sure. I figured if I could some sort of grappling situation be good. And then he kind of stepped away, and the first thing I thought was, I'm just going to go for a flying knee. Okay, let's just keep going. So I just, did a jumping knee. Didn't get him with it, but just the fact that I was able to get up off getting dropped and do a flying knee, and then, start pressuring me even harder than I was. Then I was thinking, it's do or die for me here. And then I got on the double leg and basically kind of sacrificed, like barrel rolled him over me, and had to lift him up and slam him again. And then I got into a kind of a referee's position, and that's like my favorite spot to get that Darce choke. And so, I just told myself that if I get him to the ground and I get my hands around his neck, it's going to be over. I'm going to give everything I have, and I'm just really going to push for a Darce choke. My Darce choke is one of my best chokes I have. So once I got him down, once I kind of, dragged him down and got locked up, I knew it was over, from the jump. And, luckily it panned out the way I wanted to, but it just goes to show maybe I should have done a little bit of grappling earlier in the fight, because the first grappling exchange we had, I was able to, choke him out, relatively easy.
10 seconds or so.
Yeah, but, I think, it all adds up together, me, putting the pressure on him, catching him the shots on the feet, doing a little body work, banging up his legs a little bit. All that adds up, man. People don't get that. It's not good it's hard to choke somebody when they're fresh and they have a bunch of fight in them. First round you try choking somebody, they're fresh, you're ready to, defend till they die. But, you start really putting pressure on people, start breaking them down, then they start looking for a way out. And
That's right.
I'm not saying he was looking for a way out, but I just knew that my credentials on the ground were better than his. And if I got him in a compromising position, it'd be easier for him to want to let go or just, let it happen after beating him up for a couple of rounds. So, that's kind of, how it played out. And, it sounds like it would have been a good game plan if that was my game plan, but it was kind of like a game plan. I just, got on the fly, it's just kind of how I train. I just keep the pressure, and I take the opportunities when they come.
Yeah, and it probably worked out with you, because if you just took him down quickly and got a submission, you probably wouldn't have got that $50K, because that was a hell of a fight. And if it wasn't for Dustin Poirier and Dan Hooker, it could have been even bigger, because it might have been fight of the night. I mean, Brandon Allen and Kyle Dawkins had a hell of a bloody fight too. I'm going to get you out of here soon, but quick question. I know you got the small cut, so it's going to put you on the sideline for a little while, but best case scenario, how quick would you like to turn? And second part of that question is, you've been mentioning you want to be picky and you don't want to just fight anybody. So is there somebody in mind that you would like to fight?
30 to 40 days, 30 to 45 days, with the cut, will put me in like mid-August. I think they're going to have like shows back here in Vegas from like all of August and like, I think some of September too. So I'm thinking maybe like September. I still got, my ankle's kind of bruised up, it's swollen. I got a couple other like bumps and bruises on me that I would just want to heal up before I get into a fight camp again. So, it sucks being a fighter, because it's always like nagging injuries, always, hanging around. And I just rather.
And then you get someone like, sorry to interrupt you, then you get someone like me, can't even let you rest. I got to ask you, like, hey, when are we going to see you go through war again?
No, you know what? I love it. One of my favorite things to do is to spar on Tuesdays, and then also to spar, sometimes on Thursdays, because I know people have had a hard week, and I've had a hard week every week. Every week is hard for me. So when I show up and I spar on those days, like, I just love, I love stepping in there sore, because I know if I can do it then in a fight, it's no problem. And, but yeah, so, I want to let myself heal up a little bit. I don't want any injuries to get worse, because I'm just, overtraining them. And, but nobody in mind per se. I want to sit down with my manager and my coaches and really, maybe cherry pick like 4 or 5 guys that are on the roster right now that, maybe haven't fought or have been fighting, but they can still fight because they didn't get injured or something, that I would prefer to fight over other people, and see if those guys would want to take the fight. I think obviously my performance is going to scare a few guys off, but, maybe there's a couple guys out there that might be worried about getting cut if they don't accept something, maybe coming off a loss or something. And, but honestly, I really just want exciting fights. I don't care. I'd rather stand there and bang with another Sean Woodson again, just like we did, than, go in there and just try to out wrestle somebody or have a boring fight. I've always been one of those guys that just rather be a fan favorite. I think that's what even the UFC is looking for. If you go out there and you perform, like you better believe Dan Hooker and Poirier did not do anything bad for Hooker. Like, if anything, that just, built him up even more in the UFC because of how good that fight was. It was a fight of the night. If you get fight of the nights, you get performances, and you still lose, it's still a plus on your record in my book. If you did a good job, that's what they're looking for. I mean, you got guys like Leonard Garcia, who was on like a 6-fight losing streak, but he was such an exciting fighter.
That's right.
People knew that kid was going to come and bang every single time. So it didn't matter how many times he lost in a row. They were still signing him because he was bringing crowds, and that's the kind of guy I want to be. I don't want to be a punch drunk retard, but at the same time, I want people to enjoy watching me fight, and I want to be smart about it as well. But I don't have anybody in mind yet. But after sitting down with my coaches and my my management, we'll figure out a few guys. But we'll figure it out then.
Yeah. I just mentioned that you talked about Dan Hooker. Yeah, he lost an absolute war, but there isn't a single fight fan in the world who's not a fan of Dan Hooker after his performance on Saturday. Very last question for you. Like we mentioned, this time a week ago, you weren't in the UFC, and you didn't expect to get a big $50,000 deposit. So with that said, do you have a girlfriend or a wife or anything?
I'm married.
Married. Okay, so my question to you, because I shouldn't ask you, this question should actually be towards your wife. What is your wife spending the $50,000 on?
It's so funny because me and my wife had a house here in Vegas, and we ended up selling it because we wanted to downsize and we wanted to start saving some money. She's going to school right now to be a teacher, and I eventually want to do the same. But like I said, man, I was, I didn't think I was ever going to get back in the UFC, man. So I was looking at other options, and I still kind of want to, still go to school. To get my education degree. But so we were trying to downsize. We were trying to, cut as many bills as possible. Being a fighter is a struggle. I was an Uber driver. I'm still an Uber driver out here in Vegas. And so, and I don't see myself stopping doing that, especially in the meantime. I mean, there's no reason to think that this is going to last forever because it doesn't. I'm 30. I turn 31 next month. I could see myself doing this for another 4 or 5 years. But I want to be smart about it myself. I don't want to be one of those guys who's punch drunk when he's older, and I want to know who my grandkids are. I want to be able to share that legacy with them. But my wife is. If it was honestly, I'm the guy who doesn't care about saving the money. I don't mind that stuff. We want to spend it on something, whatever, do it. My wife is the more conservative one, so she's the one holding on to it, and she's going to be the one that's going to be putting it towards things that we need it towards, and we'll probably have some of that money saved in our bank account for years to come. So, and I hope to be able to put more towards that, with, being back in the UFC and being able just to, kind of save for the future. We want to have kids soon. I'm 30. She's 28. So, she's in that baby phase. And I got a dog a couple years ago to slow that down a little bit, but we're past that point now. She really wants to have kids, and every little kid she sees, she wants to have one. So, I want to have some money saved up and, be a little financially smart about it. So, she helps me out with that, but she ain't spending it on nothing, basically. Probably on a kid when we have one.
That's what I say. As a father of 3, when the woman wants to have kids, you're gonna have kids. I'm sorry to break that news to you, my man.
Exactly. Hey, I'm with it. I totally want kids as well. I just want to be, in a position to be able to have one and be able to take care of it to my best abilities.
Yeah, it'll absolutely change your life. Unlike no matter what people tell you, you'll never really know until it happens. I'm really big into finances. I study it. Actually on our recap thing. We call the trending up, trending down. Like we do it by the stock market. We call it the bulls and the bears, which is a stock market reference. I'm really into that stuff. And there's one guy that I follow really good, Dave Ramsey. He talks about every relationship has a saver and a spender. So you are the spender. She is a saver. In my household, my wife is the spender, and I'm the saver. Yeah.
Loves Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey.
Oh, there you go. But I am too. I'm a big fan. So make sure you don't take out those student loans. Julian, congratulations, my man. I'm so happy for you. It's nice to hear guys just grinding and have so much success. Congratulations once again.
I appreciate it, brother. Thank you very much.
There he is, guys. Julian Juicy J Erosa, one of my favorite nicknames. All right, guys. I want to thank Julian Erosa one more time for coming on the show. We went much longer than I told him we would. He's just really fun to talk to. Fantastic story, fantastic win this past weekend, so congratulations to him. Guys, obviously we have no predictions to do as there isn't a UFC happening this weekend. So what I want to talk about is just a little things that happened with Loudmouth MMA and the Sherdog Radio Network. A couple weeks ago, I announced that Loudmouth MMA will be partnering with Sherdog Radio Network. It's something that me and Mike Fridley, the head guy at Sherdog, were talking about for a while, trying to figure out everything. It had to hit a couple speed bumps because of everything that was going on with Loudmouth. As some of you guys know, we've had a lot of changes in Loudmouth. First thing was Mike Heck going over to MMA fighting. Obviously, we were sad to lose him, but we were actually so thrilled for him to get a full-time gig in the industry. He's absolutely killing it. He's making us all proud. I know I speak for both me and Kyle Steele, who started Loudmouth, that we take some pride in that, to see one of our own doing so well. We had other guys leaving, guys like Craig Allen, John Franklin, just things that, they were busy with other things, wanted to do different things. I'm friends with both of them. I plan on having both of them on here soon, so it's not like that. But we tried, me and Kyle got together, threw some ideas. We tried to work on some things worked, some things didn't. But we are going to continue to try to build this network, more shows, more hosts. But I want to talk about what's going to be happening with with Sherdog. So with Sherdog, if you guys know Sherdog, it means so much to me because Sherdog I think is the greatest MMA website. I'm so proud to write for them. It has the richest history. When I think about MMA podcasting, I think about when I was first starting to listen to podcasts. I think about TJ DeSantis. I think about Jeff Sherwood. I think about Greg Savage, Jordan Breen, Josh Gross. I mean, these guys were fantastic. And they had this full network. They had about five or six shows a week. Guys, I understand how great that was. And I love, I was the guy, if you guys know this, I was the guy that listened all the time. But besides listen, I called in. All those guys knew me as Keith from Providence, or Keith, when I moved to Coventry, Keith from Coventry would call in and interrupt, and I would debate with Greg Savage and all this. Listen, I want this network to be as good as that once was. But please do this. Please do not compare me to TJ DeSantis. TJ is fantastic. He's the best. He's doing this much longer than me. He's definitely more technically sound. He gets the in and outs. He's been trained in radio. And TJ is someone I look up to. So while I'm flattered to even be compared, I know I can't compare with him. I know that. And I'm accepting that. But there's a lot of ideas we want to do, some things that they did back then. I don't want to say they did back then at Sherdog that we want to bring back. And then there's other things that we do at Loudmouth that we want to add to the Sherdog network. And between the two great teams, I think it's a great partnership. We have such a big talent pool to pull from. Me and Ben Duffy have the Shillan and Duffy show where we're doing the recaps. We're going to expand that. We're bringing back the Sherdog Roundtable. It's going to be me and Ben Duffy. We'll probably have a third guest every week. This week is the first week we're coming back. UFC 251. I should say next week. UFC 251. We have a roundtable. We have Craig Allen for Fight Night Picks. The guy I was just talking about was with Loudmouth. Shows you that there's no hard feelings with him moving on. We're going to do more interviews. The All Angle show, the one I was doing John Franklin, we plan on bringing that back. Probably shooting more towards UFC 252. And doing the big pay-per-views. So there's a lot of things we want to do. You guys, just do me a favor. Stick around. Give us suggestions. Reach out to me. Reach out to me on Twitter. It's at Keith Shillan MMA. It's at Keith Shillan MMA. My last name is spelled Shillan. Reach out to me. Give me suggestions. I'm open to suggestions. I think all of us here at Loudmouth and Sherdog are open to suggestions. And guys, hit the like, hit the subscribe. Tell your friends about it. And help us become better. All right, guys. That's all we have for this week. I want to once again thank Julian Erosa, and I'll be back next week. UFC 251 weeks. We got a big week. Stay locked.